Over the years, countless thousands of new farm inventions have made their first brave appearance in public at agricultural shows like the Royal. Some have sunk without trace. Others quickly became part of standard farming practice. But wherever there's a problem to be solved, sooner or later someone will come up with a solution which might just work. Ever since the plow was invented, people have been trying to improve on it. Early on, each locality had its own individual style, fashioned in the village smithy. But when firms like Ransom's brought out models with interchangeable parts, the village blacksmith was relegated to a storekeeper. Some of the tackle used 100 years ago would be instantly recognizable today. Turnip drills certainly haven't changed much. But a lot of the cultivation equipment which dominated the 19th century patent applications never really caught on. In 1858, for instance, the revolving helical ploughshare corkscrewed its way into obscurity. These were the golden years for inventors who were capitalizing on the need to mechanize. The Edwardian farmer might have been tempted to replace his humble scarecrows with a far more aristocratic version. Mr. Knight's patent digging machine met visitors to the Smithfield Show in 1878, and it was surely agriculture's brief flirtation with steam power that unleashed pure creative genius. Derby's patent broadside digger, a forerunner of minimal cultivation, was a spectacular flop. But as long as horsepower remained the driving force, implement design was limited, and it wasn't until the arrival of the tractor that completely new farming systems were developed. In recent years, the trend to winter cereals has forced designers to investigate high-speed cultivation and to find equipment capable of producing autumn seed beds as quickly as possible. Earlier this year, a totally new concept emerged. Known as the shaver plow, it's an implement which skims off the top few inches of soil, leaving behind what is close to an ideal tilth. It aids stubble clearing by letting the rubbish dehydrate on the surface and allows, say, oilseed rape to be drilled just that bit earlier. The story behind the shaver plow is one of a remarkable career in farm innovation. Years ago, Horstein Farmery was demobbed from the army with just a few pounds in his back pocket. Son of a contractor, he returned home to North Newbold, a small village near Beverley. With little more protection from the elements than a canvas sheet, he set up business in the yard where his father kept a few animals. Soon he was very much in demand among the farming community for his engineering skills. Today, his old yard is full of mementos from different types of machinery dating back to those early hectic beginnings. It was a business that prospered. The work was never ending, and the labor force grew and grew. New premises were found, large enough to cope with full-scale manufacture and constant research and development. But 5 years ago, the sheer pressure of work made Horstein sell up, mainly in an effort to get back to grassroots. His name hasn't gone, though, and he now acts as consultant for several other concerns. But he never forgets the early years.
Must be the only person who ever started an engineering business in a wigwam.
How did that happen?
Well, you see, apart from the threshing machine, we had poles arranged in a tripod in the middle of the yard for lifting timber, and I just wrapped a tarpaulin sheet around it and stuck the bonnet of a tractor or a car, whatever we were working on, underneath the tarpaulin sheet. And, of course, then, welding plants, there weren't many welding plants about in villages in those days, and one farmer had bought one of these welding plants and had a clue how to use it, and I said, well, you know how to use these things, why don't you get into action? And first one farmer got to do something, and then, so really that's what innovation is. The farmer will tell you what to do, but you're the guy who's got to find the nuts and bolts answer to what he wants.
Now, what sort of work came out of that yard?
Well, I think the reason that we got into innovation was because we did repairs, which might seem rather strange to you, but the more one sees of the repair side and the servicing side, the more one realizes what progress is needed. And for instance, we were repairing a truck one day, and I found I was with a shovel shoveling lime off the back of a wagon and decided to do something about it. And that got us into making lime spreaders. I was once working on a carrot washer, washing carrots, and think, well, it's a bit stupid putting carrots into Hessian sacks. And I suggested to the merchant concerned that we ought to put them into things that had just been invented, called polythene sacks, polythene bags, back in 1954. And promptly this village lad was given a ticket and shot off to America, and I spent 3 weeks in America studying these new things called polythene bags, which they were indeed already pre-packing. And I came back then and produced pre-packaging machinery.
Now, what about the granular applicators? What about them? How did they start?
Well, again, this, strange as it may seem, I found a farmer with an inverted oil can, the old taper neck variety, with 2 tubes running it from it, tapping it with a piece of stick, getting fertilizer to run down onto his sugar beet, and I mechanized it into a fertilizer applicator. And then I got a call from a chemical company in this country and said, would my granule applicator apply Attapulgate granules? And my letter was brief in return and quick in return. And I said, yes, what are they?
The transition from spraying to cultivating was quite natural. Gerald Everson, a local farmer friend with a manufacturing interest in the plough, helped to put it through critical tests. It was quickly dismissed for use on grassland and after kale. On rock-hard pea stubble, it needed extra ballast before it could do the job, as well as on cereal stubble.
That's what we want. We want something with a single pass that leaves it light.
And you don't mind this,
everything.
And you don't mind this slight tendency to get a little bit of a cloddy.
No, because it'll break down anyway. Because we aren't very deep, you know.
No. Well, it looks to be deep, but
yeah.
You don't. You'll say it isn't quite as deep.
No,
as
you go and have a look.
We'll have a look at the first. Yes. What do you think to that, then, Gerald?
I think it's very good, that.
What do you think of
Super.
that?
It's super, is that? Look, and that's the soul of it. We're only.
Look at that.
We're not half as deep as you think it looks when you're going through with the crop.
Ah, look, and there's your volunteer cereals, all nicely buried. That should be the...
All mixed in. That's the idea.
Nice, humid seed bed.
Yeah, that's smashing.
Well, we got the
and
bacteria
it's
can
a level
really
bed,
get
you see.
Very
That's what I
nice.
like about
Beautiful,
it.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That.
The shaver plough's full-width blade was originally conceived as a series of several independent shallow ploughs, a development which is fast gaining popularity. But the problem of trash burial forced a rethink and a different mode of action.
Tell me, how does the shaver plough work?
Well, the first object, because we've got a full-length blade, so all tap roots of any growing plants are severed. So that is the first thing. And then, of course, we take the first somewhere between 3 and 6 inches of soil and throw them up in the air so that they are, soil is fully broken and aerated. It is getting air into the soil, which is the important point, so that aerobic bacteria can go to work on all vegetable matter and indeed some fungi in the soil.
Now, what advantages has this got over conventional systems?
Well, most conventional systems, they tend to bury weed seeds. And I think the wild oats, for instance, have become a plague dimensions ever since we've been using these cultivators at harvest, because we've been putting slots down which the weed seeds go, possibly 8 to 9 inches in the soil. Not the, whereas we are creating an ideal environment on the soil surface to get the weed seeds to germinate. And then, of course, we kill them off before sowing the crop, which is going to be a big help to your herbicide program.
What about power requirements?
Well, this is not as dramatic as people imagine. Obviously, if you've got very hard soils, it's certainly less than a conventional cultivator, for instance. But it's not as much as you imagine, simply because this is levering the soil upwards, whereas a plough, for instance, is a glorious example where you are driving a wedge through the soil. This isn't. You're lifting up. It's like a gardener taking his fork and lifting the soil. As you can see, you wouldn't get very far. A gardener wouldn't get very far if he put his fork in the soil and pulled it horizontally, like you've got with the conventional cultivator. But of course, you can do it when you lever the soil upwards.
It looks a little old-fashioned to me. Where did the idea come from?
Well, it really, I don't mind it being called old-fashioned at all, because these were ideas put to me by my father many years ago, where all the old cultivators, of course, were curved. like this, and that gives you the ideal progress of the soil. For instance, where we've been working on a lot of peon, which is very difficult to get through a cultivator, it rolls up around here, then disappears between the legs. It's intended to roll any trash there is on the surface, roll it and then shoot it out through the centre. And of course we've achieved that by going into this cast steel rather, method of construction.
Everyone rather imagines that innovators and designers like yourself have to be good on the drawing board. Are you?
Oh, well, if that was so, I'd be a total failure. Because I'm not at all good on the drawing board. You know, I'm much better with a piece of chalk or a screwdriver drawing in the concrete. I mean, that's my way of drawing. You need draftsmen. I don't want to give you the impression one doesn't need draftsmen. For your first innovative shot does involve what I call knife and fork engineering.
This was rather like the way Henry Ford used to design his cars.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a great example of a man who couldn't really read a drawing. And they found the answer was, indeed, to get a pattern maker to make it in wood so that he could improve the shape. And this was the genius of Henry Ford, that he had the eye which could detect the correct shape.
Where did the idea for the shaver plough come?
It came through talking to various farmers who had this problem of sowing autumn cereal. They just don't plough for an autumn seedbed. And here we're able to work the soil up for them and clean the soil, particularly for rape growing and all autumn cereals.
So the idea came more from the farmers than from you as an innovator?
Oh, well, all ideas come from the farmers. I mean, an innovator, the job of an innovator is to listen to farmers and detect a requirement. The successful innovator is the one who does the correct analysis of what farmers have said. You know, pick the commercial winner from these discussions.
Is that an easy task?
Well, I don't like answering that one. I think it is, but a lot of people fail in that respect, in my opinion. A lot of engineers tend to design something they'd like to make rather than going to the farmer and seeing what is ideal for his requirements. Engineers must study agronomy to some extent, or you're not going to get your machine right. You must study. I've spent as much time thinking about soil bacteria and what happens in the soil, as much time on that as I have indeed in the engineering. The engineering input here is quite minimal compared to the thinking I've done on what the soil was. Whilst I've been working on this, I've been absolutely amazed to go in the fields and find these farmers with this enormous power input into seedbeds. And if you take a spade and dig down into their fields now and look at the soil structure, we are destroying our soil structure. And this is what we are working towards here, improving soil structure. Get that nice humus layer on top, and then, of course, work with your subsoilers on lands that demand it.
Even though the plough is on the market, development work continues. A special weight tray is being designed, and to improve the post-ploughing effect, there'll be facilities for a crumbler roller to follow. Making modifications is an essential part of the business. Whenever new creations are being tested out, farmers find themselves involved all along the line.
In a lot of cases, it's from them that the
the major ideas come, and possibly more importantly, when we've got a prototype and the prototype goes out on the farm to be tested, it's the farmer that points out the little details to us, and very often it's the little details that are so absolutely important in making or not making the product.
How extensive are your testing procedures?
Well, of course, a lot depends upon what we're marketing, what we're making, what we're trying to develop. It might be something very simple, and we only need a few very simple tests. Sometimes the tests might go on for months and months and months. Just because something works the first time on a particular farm, it doesn't mean that it's right. The cattle crate was an example where the very first time we tested it, everything was fantastic. The next time we tested it, we put some rather wild beasts into it. They wrecked the cattle crate, and a very large white bull chased me around the farmyard. The thing that somebody thinks is a great idea, yes, it is a great idea, but if you can't find the proper niche for it in the market, or maybe if you can't really establish that there is a need, the fact that it's a good idea doesn't mean that it will sell, it might not sell. I'm sure that the world is littered with good ideas that ended up in a graveyard.
But not all prototypes end up in premature retirement like this early vibrating subsoiler. One survivor was hand-built in the early 60s by an engineer who is still determined to see it developed. Painstakingly constructed from the kind of material found in any farm workshop, this machine was designed to lift potatoes with the minimum of damage. Revolving forks drop into the ground at right angles to the crop and gently carry the potatoes back to the rear. Trying to find a manufacturer has cost inventor Tom Milbourn from Carlisle an enormous amount of time and money. It's a revolutionary departure from the conventional chain web system, and many of the parts were plundered from earlier models.
The first machine used the same principle as this, only though the prongs were carried on 2 chains. And there were a lot more wearing parts. This machine could be put away at the end of the season and brought out again. That horrible chain web was in use in the last century. They've improved they've done away with the steel linkage, and they've put them onto fabric belts, but it's still a horrible thing when you realize that it's trying to get rid of the stuff, and it drops through onto the law run, and is carried forward, causing more congestion. I should think that it's one of the most horrible pieces of equipment in use in the world today.
That's the chain web?
The chain web. Horrible.
After nearly 20 years on the road, it found its way to Lowther Park Estates near Penrith, who had agreed to lend a half-acre site for yet another field trial. A single-row machine, everything seemed to be in good working order, although admittedly the horns had been removed. And it certainly found the crop. The patent has now run out on this unique machine, but Tom Milburn is still determined to find a manufacturer. All it needs, he claims, is a simple elevator to lift the potatoes onto a trailer. But over the years, he's grown a trifle bitter about the total lack of development funds coming his way.
The whole thing's wrong. The Scotch station, the last time I was there, about 7 years ago, they were messing on with a 2-drum thresher. Don't tell anyone, mind, 2-drum threshers in these days of combines. How daft can you get?
And you think they'd be better developing your machine?
Well, certainly. Any farm man knows that if once through the drum doesn't thresh it, it isn't ripe. And yet they were messing on with that, and my machine just crying out to be developed. And there was a pinstripe type came from the National Research Development Corporation to examine the machine when it was in Sunderland, and he turned it down along with a die casting machine. I don't think he'd ever been in a potato field, and on the evidence of that one man, the National Research Development Corporation, NRDC, didn't help me. Now, these things, there should be a committee of agricultural engineers, electrical engineers, and various other branches, electronics and that, hold a 6-monthly meeting to decide which ought to be developed, not depend on one man who, as I say, I don't think had ever been in a potato field. That's the National Research Development Corporation. About the same time, the NRDC were developing a maternity corset, which of course is a laudable object, but hardly as important as lifting potatoes without damage, but we won't go into that.
To all intents and purposes, a simple forestry grab, and thousands are in daily use. But if the hydraulic pipes on an ordinary grab burst, the jaws lose their bite and the load crashes to the ground. This one is different. It incorporates a brand new fail-safe device so that even if the hydraulic pipes are completely removed, the load stays intact. The mechanical equivalent of lockjaw. There's an enormous potential in the safety market. But so far, this modest little development from the drawing board of Scott's inventor Charlie Elliott just hasn't been taken up. Manufacturers in the UK don't appear interested, and there are no legal requirements to provide this kind of operator safety. There are, however, possibilities abroad, particularly in Scandinavia, which is arguably more safety conscious. But for the inventor, foreign patents can cost thousands, and infringements are difficult to police. Lowther tractorman John Cannon is unlikely to patent his homemade device. As any ploughman knows, it's essential to mark out a field as accurately as possible, and one click every 2 meters allows him to do just that. On every farm in Britain where there's a problem to solve, there's usually a one-off solution. Occasionally, there's a commercial pot of gold to be made out of it, although more often not. But there's certainly a bit of an inventor in everyone, even if some people don't like the title.
You don't like being called an inventor. Why not?
No, I think, you know, I'd have to grow a beard and let my hair grow a bit longer if, you know, that. I think it's the wrong image. I think all I've ever done is take a farmer's idea and meet what he wants. No, I don't like the title inventor. It conjures up the wrong image.
Now, you must have had some failures as well, apart from the successes.
Oh, I think, yes, and I think this is the better innovator, the man who is successful at innovating, who can keep the momentum up when he hits adversity. You know, when things go wrong, every piece of equipment you ever develop, it always hits a patch where you could quickly lose faith. That's when you've got to have the guts to keep going, and that's when you must do your own assessment. That's the important thing. You must stand back and do your own assessing and say, is this worth carrying on with? You know, how do we move forward with this? You've got to turn deaf ears to a lot of people.